Sebastian Carter hated costume parties, which was exactly why his assistant had bought him a ticket to the biggest one in Manhattan. "You need to loosen up," she'd said, practically shoving the gold-trimmed invitation into his hand that morning. "You're 34, richer than God, and still alone. Go, wear a mask, pretend you're not a billionaire for once." So now he stood inside the ballroom of the Astorian, dressed in a sleek tailored black suit and a Venetian mask that covered half his face. The chandeliers glittered above him. Champagne flowed. Music pulsed. And everyone was someone else for the night. No one here knew who he was, and for once that felt like a relief, until he saw her. She wasn't dressed like the others. No glitter, no feathers, no desperate attempt to be noticed. Her gown was simple black satin off the shoulder, hugging her frame like it had been made for her. Her mask was delicate silver, almost like lace. But it was her eyes that caught him sharp, intelligent, and completely uninterested in impressing anyone. She was laughing, a real laugh, not the forced kind he'd heard all night, and before he could think twice, he was walking straight toward her. "Trying to disappear in plain sight?" he asked, stopping beside her. She turned, her brows lifting slightly. "Depends." "Are you trying to find me?" he chuckled. "Maybe. I'm not looking to be found, neither was I, yet here we are." She tilted her head, studying him like she was trying to read beneath his mask. "You're not like the rest of them." Is that a compliment or an insult? Yet to be determined, he laughed, and for the first time in a long time it wasn't forced. "I'm Sebastian." "Nice try," she said, sipping her champagne. "No names tonight, that's the whole point, isn't it?" He grinned. "Fine. Then tell me something else. What do you do when you're not hiding behind lace and champagne?" "I'm a caterer. Small events, mostly boring ones. Tonight's my break." "Caterer?" He blinked. That wasn't what he expected. She didn't carry herself like someone who served others, she carried herself like someone who didn't have time for nonsense. "Surprised?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. "A little. You don't seem like someone who keeps to the background." "Maybe I'm not. But I know how to stay out of the spotlight when it's full of people pretending to be more than they are." He liked her. A lot. She didn't know who he was, and she didn't care. She wasn't trying to impress him or sell him something. She was just real. "I'm glad you came tonight," he said. She shrugged. "I almost didn't." "What changed your mind?" She glanced at him. "Not sure yet. Ask me at the end of the night." They danced. He wasn't even sure when it started, but suddenly they were on the floor and her hand was in his. Her laugh was soft near his ear. Her body leaned into his like it had always belonged there. He hadn't felt this alive in years. After an hour, they slipped out onto the rooftop terrace where the city stretched out around them. They leaned on the railing, side by side, masks still on. "I don't even know your name," he said again, quieter this time. "Would it change anything if you did?" she asked. "No," he said honestly, "but I'd still like to know it." She hesitated. Then finally, "Cassia," he smiled. "Cassia, that's beautiful." She turned to face him. "Now it's your turn." He paused. He wanted to tell her, but something held him back. For once, he wanted to be seen without the weight of his name, his bank account, his legacy. "I'll tell you if you see me again." She raised an eyebrow. "You think I will?" "I hope you will." She considered him. "This isn't your scene either, is it?" He shook his head. "Not even close." "So why are you here?" "Maybe I was supposed to meet you." She let out a soft laugh, but her eyes lingered on his. "You're good. I'm not trying to be." They stood there in silence, the music drifting faintly from inside. Then, as the wind picked up, she turned away. "I should go." "Don't," he said quickly. "Not yet." She looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. "If we stay longer, this might become real." He stepped closer. "Maybe it already is." She hesitated, then slowly reached up and pulled off her mask. He stared. She was even more stunning than he imagined, dark eyes, full lips, and a softness that made his chest ache. He pulled off his own mask. She blinked, surprised. "You look familiar," she said slowly. "Maybe you've seen me around." "Where?" Billionaire Weekly. His heart stopped. "What?" She laughed, shaking her head. "I'm kidding. You just have that face. Like someone who's on the cover of magazines." He tried to smile, but inside something twisted. She didn't know, and he wasn't ready to tell her, not yet. "Can I see you again?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. One condition. Name it. Next time, no masks. No guessing, just truth. You've got it. She leaned in, brushing her lips against his cheek. Then I'll see you soon, Sebastian. And just like that, she was gone. He stood alone on the rooftop, heart racing. He didn't know who she really was. But he knew one thing for sure: Cassia had just completely claimed his heart. Sebastian hadn't stopped thinking about her for 3 days. Cassia. The name echoed in his head like a melody he couldn't forget. And it didn't matter how many meetings he sat through or how many zeros were on the contracts being reviewed, nothing held his attention the way she had. The problem was, he hadn't asked for a number. No last name. No way to find her. And that wasn't like him. He didn't do reckless. He didn't forget details. Hell, he ran Carter Global Holdings like a machine, one that didn't tolerate loose ends or uncertainty. But now he found himself pacing his penthouse at 2 in the morning, replaying every second of their time on that rooftop, trying to find a clue. Anything. Stop being ridiculous, he muttered to himself, staring out over the Manhattan skyline. You don't chase women you meet at masquerades. Except maybe this one time he did. The next afternoon he made a call. I need the guest list from the Astorian's masquerade, everyone who attended. Including staff. Sir, that list is private. I'll make a donation to the hotel's charitable foundation. A large one. Have it delivered to my office by noon. He ended the call and leaned back in his chair. If she was telling the truth about being a caterer, she might be listed as staff. If she wasn't well, he had more resources than most governments. He'd find her. But when the list arrived, her name wasn't on it, not as a guest, not as a caterer, not as anything. He stared at the paper, jaw tightening. She hadn't lied, he would have seen it in her eyes, so why wasn't she listed? He picked up the phone again. Get me the catering company that handled the event at the Astorian 3 nights ago. I want the full roster. It took less than an hour before his assistant returned with a name, not Cassia's but a company called Red Fern Events. Small, local, mostly private functions. He showed up at their headquarters the next morning without warning. The front of the building was modest. Brick, 2 stories, no sign beyond a small plaque by the door. The receptionist looked up, startled, as he stepped inside. I'm looking for someone, Sebastian said, walking straight to the desk. Cassia, she worked the Astorian masquerade. The woman hesitated. I'm sorry, but our employee records aren't open to the public. I'm not the public, he replied, pulling out a business card and sliding it across the desk. Tell her Sebastian Carter is here. Her eyes widened slightly, but she picked up the phone without another word. 5 minutes passed before a door opened down the hall and Cassia stepped out. She froze when she saw him. What are you doing here? I came to find you. She crossed her arms, not moving closer. Why? Because I haven't stopped thinking about you, and I didn't get a chance to ask for anything real the other night. You tracked me down, she asked, her voice calm but wary. I had to. She studied him for a beat, then turned to the receptionist. Give us the room upstairs. They walked in silence up a narrow staircase into a small office with glass windows and minimal furniture. She closed the door and leaned against it. So, she said slowly, you're that Sebastian Carter. I am. You own the building I rent, he blinked. What? Red Fern leases our kitchen space from a property owned by Carter Global Holdings. I sign your checks every month. That hit him like a slap. She hadn't just been honest, she'd been closer to his world than he'd realized. I didn't know. That much is obvious. You didn't say anything either. I wanted one night where I wasn't an employee in your empire. He stepped toward her. You weren't. You still aren't. That night wasn't about power or money. It was about us. There is no us, she said quickly, her voice tightening. Why not? Because you live in a penthouse and I live in a walk-up. You're on Forbes covers and I'm trying to keep my business from folding every quarter. We don't exist in the same reality, Sebastian. I didn't come here to talk about money. No, she said, but you came here with the power to get through a receptionist who's supposed to block strangers. That's not nothing. He took a breath. I get it. You're angry I didn't tell you who I was. I'm not angry, she interrupted. I'm cautious. There's a difference, he softened. Let me take you to dinner. No masks, no lies, just you and me. She looked toward the window, thinking, then finally she exhaled. One dinner. Tonight, she hesitated. I have deliveries until 6. I'll send a car at 7. She met his gaze for the first time since he arrived. Don't try to impress me. I won't. Good. Because if you show up with a helicopter or something ridiculous, I'll walk right out, he smiled. Understood. As he left the building, his phone buzzed. His assistant had scheduled 3 calls with European investors for that evening. He canceled all of them. Tonight, nothing mattered except Cassia. And for the first time in years, Sebastian Carter was nervous. Cassia stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, staring at the reflection of her own hesitation. The dress she wore wasn't designer, but it fit her right. Clean lines, deep navy, and elegant without trying too hard. She'd borrowed it from her friend Dahlia at the bakery downstairs, whose closet was always better stocked than her own. The earrings were simple studs. She didn't own heels, so she wore the closest thing black ankle boots polished to a shine. At exactly 7, a sleek black town car pulled up in front of her building. Not a limo, no entourage. Just a driver in a suit who offered his hand and opened the door with a quiet "Miss Ellery." She slid in, half expecting to find Sebastian already waiting, but the back seat was empty. Just a folded note on the seat beside her. You said no helicopters. I listened. S. She rolled her eyes, but her lips curved. The car took her past Midtown, then farther south, eventually stopping in front of a quiet, narrow building in Tribeca with no signage. The driver opened the door, and before she could ask anything, a man in a slate gray vest stepped out of the entrance. Welcome, Miss Ellery. Mr. Carter is waiting for you upstairs. Cassia followed him into a private elevator that opened directly into a dining room flooded with candlelight and jazz. Sebastian stood near a window that overlooked the Hudson River. He turned, and it hit her again, that impossible combination of presence and calm. He wore no tie, just a crisp white shirt with the top button undone and sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows. You came, he said. You didn't bring a helicopter. So I figured it was safe. He walked toward her, slow and measured. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't either. He offered her a chair, then took the one opposite. A waiter appeared silently, uncorked a bottle of something pale and expensive, and disappeared just as quickly. Cassia glanced around. Is this a restaurant? It's not open to the public. A friend lets me use it when I want privacy. You mean when you want to avoid being photographed? He didn't answer right away. Something like that. The food arrived in courses, light, fresh, and plated like art. Cassia picked at each with caution, her eyes often drifting to Sebastian. So, she finally said between bites of citrus-marinated sea base, why me? His brow lifted. What do you mean? You could be out with anyone, models, heiresses, women who wear couture and understand wine lists. Why chase down a stranger from a masquerade party who owns 3 pairs of shoes and once burned her eyebrows off testing a flambé recipe? He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. Because you looked at me like I was a person, not a brand, not a checkbook. Not some fantasy you wanted to climb into. You were a fantasy, you still kind of are. I don't want to be, I want to be real. She tilted her head. You think one dinner makes that happen? No, but it's a start. Cassia set down her fork. You're not used to hearing no, are you? I hear it all the time, just not from people who mean it. And you think I mean it? I think you mean everything you say. She studied him, and for the first time that night, her expression softened. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone colder, harder, less, curious? I'm used to being analyzed, he said, swirling the wine in his glass. But not like this. Like what? Like you're not trying to find what's wrong with me. Just what's true. A beat of quiet passed between them, then she reached for her water. All right, she said. You get one truth, ask me anything. His eyes didn't waver. What's the thing you want most that you're afraid to admit? Cassia blinked. That's not small talk. I don't do small talk. She hesitated, then looked down at her plate. I want to expand Red Fern, buy the space we rent, hire real staff, stop doing deliveries myself. But I can't even get a loan because my credit tanked when my dad got sick and I covered everything. He watched her, quiet. Why didn't you tell me that before? Because I didn't want you to think I only came tonight to pitch you an idea. I didn't. She met his gaze. Good. He set down his glass and leaned closer. Now you ask me. Same question, fair's fair, she considered him. What's the thing you want most that you're afraid to admit? He didn't look away. To stop pretending I like the life I built. That surprised her. You hate it? No, he said. But I don't love it, not anymore. She opened her mouth to say something, then stopped. Instead, she reached across the table and touched his hand lightly. The contact was brief seconds at most, but his chest tightened like she'd reached inside and pulled something loose. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Something was shifting between them. After dinner, he walked her to the car, the city humming softly around them. Thank you, she said, leaning against the open door. For what? For not making tonight about you. He stepped closer. It was never going to be. She hesitated. What happens now, that depends on you. Cassia looked at him for a long moment, then stood on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't shy or uncertain, just warm, steady, and full of something unspoken. When she pulled back, her voice was soft. I'll see you again, but next time I pick the place. Deal. She slid into the car and Sebastian watched it drive away, a strange ache blooming in his chest. For the first time in his life, he wasn't in control of what came next, and he didn't want to be. Cassia stood at the counter of her kitchen, elbow deep in batter, when Dahlia leaned in from the doorway, her eyes wide. There's a man in a suit downstairs. Says he's here for you. Says his name is Sebastian. Cassia dropped the whisk, her heart skipping a beat. He's early. Dahlia tilted her head. You knew he was coming? No, Cassia said, wiping her hands on a towel, but I hoped he might. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, brushing flour from her apron. Sebastian stood by the curb, no car in sight this time. Just him, holding 2 paper cups from the corner cafe. I figured if I didn't show up soon, you'd think I got bored, he said. Flour covered and sweating over a convection oven isn't exactly the vision most men chase. I'm not most men. She accepted the coffee and took a sip. This was supposed to be my turn. It still is, he said, glancing past her. I brought something. Cassia followed his gaze. Parked at the corner was a delivery van. The driver opened the back to reveal crates of kitchen equipment, industrial mixers, shelving, stainless steel prep tables. All brand new. What is this? She asked, stunned. You told me you needed better tools. You didn't ask for anything, which made me want to give you everything. I didn't, I know, he said gently. Which is why this isn't a favor, it's an investment, she blinked. You want to buy into Red Fern, I want to buy the building, and lease it back to you. With terms that only kick in once you're profitable. You do that. I already did. Cassia stared at him, her throat tight. Why? Because I believe in you, and because I'm tired of pretending my money only matters when it makes more money. I want it to mean something. She stepped back, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, he said. Just use it, build what you want. Her voice was quiet. You're not trying to impress me, are you? No, he said. I'm trying to prove I see you. She looked down at the cup in her hands. I'm not used to people showing up for me. Then let this be the start. Cassia turned toward the van again, then back to him. Come inside. You can help me prep the afternoon orders. You're letting me into the kitchen. Don't get excited. You're not touching anything sharp. He laughed, and they walked back inside together. Over the next hour, Sebastian tied on an apron that was 2 sizes too small and followed her instructions like a student. He sifted flour, kneaded dough under her watchful eye, and asked questions that made her laugh. Why does this smell like lemon but taste like cardboard? Because that's the gluten-free batch. I want to sue it for emotional betrayal. By the time the afternoon deliveries were packed, Cassia leaned against the fridge, arms crossed and smiling. You're better at this than I thought. Is that a compliment? It's a temporary suspension of judgment. Sebastian wiped his hands and looked around. This place is chaotic, overheated, understaffed. It's home. He stepped closer. I want to be part of it. She met his eyes. You already are. Later that night, as the sun dipped low and the kitchen quieted, Cassia led him up to the roof of the building. It wasn't much, just a few old chairs and string lights, but it gave them a view of the city that felt entirely theirs. I didn't think this would happen, she said, sitting beside him. What? You, me, this? I didn't either, he admitted, but it was the first thing in a long time that didn't feel like a performance. She watched the skyline. You're different when you're not surrounded by power. I feel different when I'm with you. Cassia turned to him. What happens now? Sebastian took her hand. Now I stop pretending I know everything. And I ask if you'll let me be part of whatever comes next. She studied him, the man who had walked into her life behind a mask and somehow left every wall she built in pieces. I will, she said quietly. He kissed her, then not with urgency, but with certainty. The kind that said this wasn't fleeting, that this wasn't just a night or a gesture or a whim, it was real. Weeks passed. Red Fern expanded into the new space. Cassia hired 2 employees. Orders doubled. Sebastian never interfered, never hovered. He showed up with coffee, cleaned dishes when she forgot, and once flew in a chocolatier from Belgium just to help her finish a wedding cake order in time. Cassia never asked for any of it. He just knew. At a private gala held in the Carter Global Rotunda, Sebastian stood at the podium, surrounded by the city's elite. But his eyes searched only for her. Cassia stepped into the room wearing a gown the color of dusk and no mask this time. He paused mid-speech. This company has always been about numbers, he said. But I've learned that numbers aren't everything. Sometimes, the most valuable thing you ever do is show up for someone when it matters. He looked right at her. And sometimes, you go to a party thinking you're hiding, and instead, you find the one person who sees you clearer than anyone ever has. The room went silent. I went to that masquerade because I was bored, cynical, and convinced I'd seen everything. I left knowing I hadn't seen anything at all. He stepped down from the stage and crossed the room toward her. In front of hundreds of people, he took her hand and lowered to one knee. Cassia's breath caught. I've built empires, but I've never built something that felt like home until you. You claimed my heart the moment we danced on that rooftop. You've made me want to be better, do better, feel more, and I don't want another day without you. He opened a velvet box. Inside was a ring that caught the light like fire. Cassia Ellery, will you marry me? She stared at him, the man who had once been just a stranger in a mask, and nodded through the tears in her eyes. Yes. The room erupted, but all Cassia heard was the sound of his voice, whispering I love you against her hair as he pulled her into his arms. And in that moment, under the lights of an empire he no longer needed to hide behind, Sebastian Carter knew he'd found the only thing that had ever truly mattered, her. Cassia stood in the doorway of the newly renovated Red Fern kitchen, arms folded, watching the last coat of paint dry on the far wall. The scent of fresh wood and citrus cleaner filled the air. Her team was gone for the day, the oven silent, but her thoughts were racing. Across the room, Sebastian was crouched near a gleaming new prep station, adjusting the legs to make sure it balanced perfectly against the tile. You don't have to do that, she said. He looked up at her, wiping his hands on the side of his jeans. I like doing things that matter. She stepped in, her sneakers squeaking softly on the floor. You know, most men in your position would have written a check and vanished. I didn't fall in love with you to disappear. She leaned against the counter beside him. No prenup, he looked at her, amused. You're serious. I'm practical. I'm not marrying you for practicality. But if I take everything in the divorce and run to Costa Rica, you'd really be okay with that? I'd chase you there and beg you to take half of it back. She laughed, then grew quiet. You're sure? He stood. About you, completely. Cassia reached for his hand, threading her fingers with his. Then let's not wait, he blinked. Wait for what? The wedding. I don't want a 6-month engagement filled with tastings and color swatches. I want to be your wife. Now, he pulled her in so fast she gasped, wrapping his arms around her like he was anchoring himself. Say when. Saturday. That's 3 days from now. Do you need longer? I needed forever. 3 days is generous. They didn't tell anyone but Dahlia. Not because they wanted secrecy, but because they wanted peace. The ceremony happened in the backyard of Dahlia's brownstone, under a string of lights and a lilac tree just starting to bloom. Cassia wore a tea-length dress she'd found in a vintage shop 2 blocks from the bakery. Sebastian wore charcoal gray, no tie, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. When Sebastian looked into her eyes and said, "You changed everything," Cassia didn't cry. She simply held his face and whispered, "So did you." They signed no press release. They posted no photos. But everyone who mattered knew. A week later, Sebastian walked into the boardroom of Carter Global Holdings and placed a single folder on the polished table while 12 executives stared at him. "I'm stepping back," he said. The silence was immediate. "You're retiring?" someone asked. "No. I'm shifting. The company's in a place where it doesn't need me every day. I'll chair quarterly. The rest of the time, I'm investing in small business development projects, starting with Red Fern." He left the room before anyone could argue. Outside, Cassia waited by the elevator, leaning against the marble wall with her hair loose and a coffee in hand. She handed it to him as the doors closed. Did they faint? No, but one man looked like he might throw up. "Progress," she said, sipping hers. They spent their days building things, not just Red Fern, but a foundation that funded culinary scholarships for students who couldn't afford school, a rooftop herb garden that supplied local restaurants, and a community kitchen that opened every Sunday for families in need. Cassia still baked every morning, still burned the occasional batch of brioche, still cursed when deliveries arrived half-melted on hot days. But now, she had someone waiting at the end of every shift, someone who knew the difference between sourdough and ciabatta and didn't mind getting flour on his shoes if it meant 5 more minutes beside her. One Friday night, while the city glowed beneath them from the terrace of their new apartment, 1 floor above the bakery and 3 floors below Sebastian's old penthouse, he handed her a small box. "I didn't get you a wedding gift. You gave me your last name." "That seems sufficient. Open it." Inside was a key. She looked up. "It's not a house," he said. "It's a bookstore, or it will be. I bought the property next door. You always said you wanted a quiet place to read." Her throat tightened. "You remembered that. There's nothing about you I forget." She leaned into him, curling against his chest. "You know what I want most?" "What?" "This, just this. You, books, bread, mornings that smell like cinnamon, nights that don't end in boardrooms. A life that doesn't feel borrowed. You've got all of it." Months passed. Then a year on the anniversary of the masquerade, Cassia left a note on Sebastian's pillow, "Meet me where we met." He found her on the rooftop of the Astorian, wearing the same black dress, now shortened at the hem and faded at the seams. No mask, just her smile. He stood in the same spot where she'd once kissed his cheek and vanished. "Still not a fan of parties," he said. "Still not hiding." She held out her hand. He took it. They danced under the stars, no music, no audience. Just the hum of the city and the rhythm of hearts that had stopped pretending a long time ago. As the wind lifted the edge of her dress and the lights shimmered across her skin, he whispered in her ear, "You didn't just change my world. You gave me one I never knew I needed." She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. "I know. Because you gave me mine too." And in that quiet, perfect moment, as the city blinked below them and the past faded into something distant and unimportant, Sebastian and Cassia held each other like they finally understood what forever meant. They never let go.